Good evening, everybody. We have one arrival. We'll harass him when he gets here. But may I have roll call, please?
From the City Council, Mayor Harris.
Here.
Vice Mayor Cardoza.
Here.
Councilmember Baumgarten.
Here.
Councilmember Espandola. Here. And Councilmember Shaw.
Here.
And from the City Planning Commission, Chairperson Eiler.
Here.
Vice Chair Blake. Here. Commissioner Shannon.
Here.
Commissioner Schaefer. Commissioner Ali.
Here.
Commissioner Adams. Here. And Commissioner Osher.
Here.
All right, if everybody can please stand for a Pledge of Allegiance. And Carm, if you do the favor of leading us, that'd be great.
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, this evening, everybody, we're here to do a workshop on the Harter specific plan. We're going to begin today by appearance of interested citizens. If any member of the public would like to address the council or the planning commission on any item described in the notice of the meeting, please feel free to do so right now. And seeing none, we'll move on to the main event, number 2, the Harter specific plan presented by Diana Langley.
And Mayor Harris, I need to add one item to that. This is Commissioner Chairperson Eiler. I need to recuse myself from this evening as one of the partners with our real estate company is also a partner with the Harter specific plan.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, good evening, Mayor and council members and planning commissioners. So first thing I'd like to note tonight, just a little bit of housekeeping. This meeting is being filmed, videotaped. And so I know the planning commissioners are used to introducing themselves before they make their comments. We'll be able to actually see you on the video if we ever need to go back and look at the tapes. The item before you tonight is the Harter specific plan. And before I get into the presentation, I'd like to welcome Tom Tucker up here, who represents the Harter Packing folks, just to introduce the team that they've brought tonight as part of this presentation. And then further in the presentation, Mr. Tucker will actually present a few of the slides.
Good evening, council members and commissioners. My name is Tom Tucker. I'm manager for Harter Packing Company, 1321 Harter Parkway, Yuba City. I'd like to thank the commissioners and the council members for giving us this opportunity to present our plan to you and express our sincere thanks for taking time away from your duties and your family this close to the holiday. I'd like to introduce tonight some people in the audience, Mr. Carm Baines, who's a principal in Harter Packing Company, Mr. Richard Hart, who is also principal in Harter Packing Company, Mr. Ryan Dusa, who's a realtor broker in the local area and outside the local area that will be presenting a short presentation, and Mr. Mike Whipple, who does public financing and development financing. He will also be speaking tonight. With that, I give you back to Diana. Thank you.
Thank you.
One other member, an important member, is Mr. Jay Harris, who is our legal counsel, who is guiding us through this process. Thank you.
Okay, just a little bit more of housekeeping. I'm happy to answer questions during the presentation, or if you'd like me to wait towards the end and address the questions, I can do so as well. So the purpose of the workshop tonight is to provide background on the Harter specific plan, discuss obstacles to development from staff's perspective and then also Harter's perspective, and then review items that will be coming before the Planning Commission and City Council in the future. It's interesting to note because at a recent meeting that we had with the Harter folks, Tom noted that, you know, after all of these years working on this plan, that I'm probably the remaining staff member within the city that has been working on this plan, and then Tom's has the most, all of the years of experience related to this plan. So it's good that we still have that historical knowledge. The purpose of the workshop tonight is informational only. There's no expectation and there will be no action required tonight. And it's really just to provide information related to the Harter specific plan to facilitate future discussions and decisions for development of the plan. The location of the plan. So it is north of Highway 20. It's south of Butte House Road, west of Tharp Road, and then there's residential development that abuts the west side. The original Harter Packing property was approximately 200 acres in size. Prior to adoption of the Harter specific plan, the Home Depot development occurred. So when you deduct out the portion for Home Depot, it was remaining 180 acres within the Harter specific plan. The property was previously utilized for Harter Packing Company, which was a cannery, although most of the property was open space. In the late 1990s, the Harter Packing Company was about to close, and the three principal property owners expressed an interest in developing the property. So there's a long history, as we talked, related to this project. So September of 1998, a request was received to annex the property. Application was filed with LAFCO to annex the property and also detach from the Walton Fire Protection District. The annexation was approved, and then soon thereafter, a lawsuit was filed to invalidate the annexation by the Walton Fire Protection District. Due to a procedural deficiency, the court required a corrective action by LAFCO, and the annexation was actually completed in February of 2000. I know one of the things to note is that during that defending the annexation, Harter was actively involved in that and, participated in the monetary costs associated with that defense. October of 2000, the City Council approved the Home Depot project located on the north side of Highway 20, west of Tharp Road. At that time, staff informed the property owners that any further development of the remaining property, the 180 acres, would require the preparation of a specific plan and accompanying environmental document. As such, the owner submitted a specific plan application in January 2001. In June of 2001, the City Council authorized staff to enter a contract with QuadNop for the preparation of the Harter specific plan and environmental impact report to be paid for by the property owners. In November 2002, so early in the drafting of the specific plan and EIR, Brown Development Company, along with Harter Packing Company, filed an application for a 360,000 square foot retail center on what was to become the primary commercial portion of the Harter property. So that was abutting the new Home Depot development. The proposed Yuba City Marketplace, as it was called, in combination with the Home Depot development, created the largest commercial project in Yuba City at over 535,000 square feet. The scope of the EIR was revised to accommodate and analyze the impacts of this new project. So in April 2003, the Harter specific plan and EIR were scheduled for a hearing and recommendation for approval before the Planning Commission. Several days before the public hearing, it became public that a portion of the project was actually going to be a super Walmart. Out of abundance of caution, the public hearing was delayed, and the EIR was modified to provide significantly more detail about the project. Also during this time frame, the city required preparation of a financing strategy and phasing plan and a development agreement with Brown Development Company and Harter Packing Company. On October 26, 2004, City Council approved the Harter specific plan, environmental impact report, the financing strategy and phasing plan, and then a few days later, in November, they approved the development agreement and the establishment of the Harter specific plan infrastructure improvement fee. So I'm just going to sidetrack for a moment to talk about the park property dedication. During the development of the Harter specific plan in Yuba City Marketplace, staff had ongoing discussions with Harter Packing over the size of the retail facilities and appropriate land use. An agreement was made that Harter Packing would donate a 6-acre park to the city. The dedication was then increased by an additional 1.3 acres to accommodate the water storage tanks that are currently located west of Harter Parkway, just north of where the Jefferson Drive extension will be. So Harter Packing did not receive any compensation for the additional property dedicated for the water storage tanks. Now, to go back to discussions related to the actual Harter specific plan, the purpose of the plan is to provide guidance for the orderly development of the Harter Packing Company site. It includes proposed land uses, design guidelines, specific plan policies and standards, location of proposed infrastructure, and implementation financing element. This table shows a breakdown of the zoning, land use, and gross acreage. You can see that I crossed out the 6 acres. That was originally shown in the plan for dedication to the park because they actually increased that to 7.3 acres to also accommodate the water storage tanks. But you can see it's a mix of single-family residential, multifamily residential, the park, office, commercial, business park, light industrial, and then road right-of-way dedication, which typically people don't think about the volume of acres that are dedicated to road right-of-way. But out of 180 acres, you have 13.6 dedicated to road right-of-way. The financing strategy and phasing plan was prepared by Brion and Associates and addresses timing, phasing, cost, and resulting cash flow issues. It analyzed and determined an infrastructure improvement fee known as the Harter Specific Plan Infrastructure Improvement Fee, or what we call the Harter fee. I have to say that from staff's perspective, we learned a lot of lessons from this particular financing plan. It was extremely detailed as to the phasing of the development and the corresponding infrastructure improvements. And it became problematic when projects were proposed or developed out of sequence from what was identified in the financing plan. And so what the main lesson learned from this project and this financing plan, especially as we move forward with other master plan specific plans, is when it comes to the financing plan, simpler is better. More flexibility is better. This financing plan was pretty rigid in terms of how the phasing would occur and what improvements would need to be tied to the phasing. The Harter fee is developer imposed, administered by the city, and reflects the cost of construction and the application of impact fee credits. When the Yuba City Marketplace was developed, the financial consultant prepared a Harter implementation reimbursement model to track the cost to construct the infrastructure, eligible city impact fee credits, and the developer's Harter fee contribution. The city held the cash contributions, then tracked how those funds were distributed. So at the time the finance plan was finalized, the Harter fee was $9.58 per square foot for commercial, $8,160 per unit for single-family residential, $5,308 per unit for multifamily residential, $8.60 per square foot for office, and $5.01 per square foot for a business park. This becomes important as we discuss the Harter's request for impact fee reductions in future slides. The development agreement was executed November 2nd, 2004. Parties to the DA include the city, Harter Packing Company, and Brown Yuba City LLC. And the main point of the development agreement is provides vested entitlements. The term was 15 years, so technically it expired on November 2nd, 2019. But as we discussed in the upcoming slide related to the Second Amendment request, they're going to be requesting to extend that an additional 20 years. The development agreement outlines the developer obligations, including participation in lighting and landscape maintenance district, dedication of rights-of-way and other public properties prior to the issuance of the first building permit, requires design and construction of the park prior to the issuance of the 60th building permit for single-family housing or first building permit for multifamily housing. It provides a public plaza area in parcel 6, which is located adjacent to the park. The developer agrees to pay impact fees in effect at the time of submittal of a complete building permit application. They voluntarily agree to contract with a qualified conservation organization or public agency to establish an off-site agricultural easement on 130 acres of farmland of statewide importance. And then the First Amendment to the DA was executed August 5th, 2018. It modified the timing of the park construction so that 50% of the park construction shall be completed prior to the issuance of the last occupancy permit for Harter North or Harter South single-family residential developments, whichever occurs first, and the remaining 50% would be completed prior to the issuance of the last occupancy permit for the other single-family residential development. It also provided a one-year freeze on the implementation of the new impact fees adopted in 2007 and an 8-year phase-in of the new impact fees. So for instance, in year 1, the impact fees were frozen, and then over the subsequent 7 years after that, they would ramp up to 100%. All projects were required to pay the levy fee, and it outlined a methodology for credits for infrastructure development. So within the plan, so since the adoption of the Harter Specific Plan in 2004, there have been 3 significant developments. You have the Home Depot, Yuba City Marketplace, and Sierra Central Credit Union. So Home Depot was completed in 2001. Yuba City Marketplace, and I based this on the Walmart Supercenter. They were completed in 2006. And then Sierra Central Credit Union headquarters was completed in 2015. And then here's a slide that, the purpose of this slide is just to show recent commercial development that's occurred within the city within the last couple of years, with the majority of this development taking place outside of the Harter Specific Plan area. So you have, the Farm Credit West, North Star Construction, Surf Through Car Wash, Pete's Restaurant, redevelopment of Carriage Square to add in the eateries and the Bank of Feather River. And so what this is intending to show is that there has been a lot of non-residential activity within the city within the last few years, but very limited activity within the Harter Specific Plan. In regards to residential development, there's really only been one new subdivision within the city, and that's Valencia Estates, which is located north of Bradley Estates Drive, west of Blevin Road. So north of Butte House Road, west of Blevin Road, almost just northwest of Butte Vista School. And that's really been the only new residential subdivision within the city within the last few years. A lot of approved tentative maps, but not a lot of projects actually going to construction. So development within the Harter Specific Plan is very costly. Not only do you have city impact fees, you also have the Harter fee. And then they're not considered an infill area. So next Monday night, there will be a council workshop on impact fees where we'll discuss the infill area. But council previously has put forward a definition of the infill area, and properties within the Harter Specific Plan don't meet that definition, and they're not currently within the boundary of the infill area. Harter Packing has approached the city numerous times over the years to evaluate modifying land uses, infrastructure requirements, and discuss ways to make the projects more financially viable. And so in the next slide, I will be discussing obstacles to development from staff's perspective, and then Mr. Tucker will come up and spend a few minutes to talk about obstacles from Harter's perspective. So from staff's perspective, obstacles development include the downturn in the economy. Just as the plan gets approved and they're ready to move forward, we have a downturn in the economy. There's been disagreement over proposed land uses, and I know this is a little bit more of a controversial item, but particularly at the northwest corner of Highway 20 and Harter Parkway, the commercial development area, the Harter folks have come forward with different ideas for what could be placed there: a gas station, fast food restaurants, shopping center, and staff has provided feedback to that. And when it came to discussions related to fast food and gas stations, there was a lot of hesitancy. That's probably saying it nicely, from staff's perspective in terms of moving forward with a project like that. The intent was to have more commercial type developments that would bring in, I'd say like more big box store, that type of development. And so there wasn't such a focus on fast food restaurants and gas stations. Just the cost of the development. As we talked before, you have not only the city impact fee, which we know people are requesting to reduce the city impact fee. On top of that, you add in that additional layer of the Harter fee. You have the infrastructure requirements. This is an area that was developed in the county, so you're basically rebuilding the roads. You're extending, for the most part, water's there now. You still need to extend sewer lines, storm drains in place. They do have some streets that have overhead utilities that would need to be placed underground. And so there's a lot of infrastructure. You're building a parkway with Harter Parkway, so a really wide arterial right through the middle of the project. Butte House Road is an arterial. And so there's a heavy burden with that. You have land costs. Harter needs a certain amount for that land. And then traffic impacts. When the environmental impact report was prepared for this project, it assumed certain uses. So as you come forward with higher intense uses, you have to evaluate it from a traffic standpoint. And that can be difficult at times when you're talking about those really high intensity uses, particularly when you're directly adjacent to an intersection on a state highway. And so that has been a deterrent. And what complicates this project more is the George Washington Boulevard Highway 20 intersection, because that is such a problematic intersection for Caltrans on the north side. And so as you're putting projects forward that have the potential to increase traffic, it just creates a lot of discussions and to figure out how to address that traffic. So with that, I would like to invite Mr. Tucker up here to discuss the next few slides. Oh, Councilman Baumgarten.
Did you want to take questions about?
Absolutely.
Okay, so one of the things that I know you mentioned here briefly, and one that has been an item of a lot of discussion, is infill, and whether this is an infill project or not. In the Quad NOF report, it designates this as an infill project. So what was the determination that all of a sudden it's not an infill project?
So in the Quad NOF report, it does designate an infill project. And when you look at the project location, when you and the surrounding uses, I think that you would look at it and say this is an infill project. There's development surrounding. You've got residential development to the west. You've got commercial development to the east. You have newer commercial development to the south. And then you have some residential to the north. The difference is Quad NOF's definition of infill is different than the council-approved definition of infill. And so that's one of the things that we'll discuss next Monday night, is whether or not the city council wants to modify that definition of infill. Because right now, the definition would prohibit this project from being considered an infill project.
Going back on your memory since you were there, did the council consciously make the decision to not call it infill, even though the report referred to it as infill?
So I can't say definitively yes or no. Based upon the definition that they put forward, I have to think that there was some consideration, because any projects that have a master plan, specific plan, are specifically excluded from being an infill project.
Okay, thank you.
Except the Central City specific plan.
Thank you.
Any other questions before Mr. Tucker comes up? Okay.
Good evening again. Tom Tucker, Harter Packing Company. Just briefly before we go to the obstacles that we're faced with the development on the project, I just want to recap a couple items that Diana touched over. In 1998, when we sought annexation, Walton District filed a lawsuit challenging the annexation. In discussion with the then chief, Mr. Baumgarten, in the city, it was relayed to us that they could not continue to annex under Walton's conditions. Those conditions back then were Walton agreed to annexation of former properties, the Sam's Club and the Walmart property. However, the city was going to provide services, and Walton was going to collect the tax funding from those projects. The city said they couldn't continue to annex under those conditions, and Harter took that battle to court at an extreme cost of $150,000 to defeat that. Otherwise, it could have been many years before someone else took that battle. Harter knew it wasn't right. It's not right to have some fire people sitting in the station watching TV collecting money while somebody else is down there on the front line providing emergency services to that property. So Harter has endeavored to do what it felt was right and correct for the benefit of the Yuba City, and not only Harter. So we have common goals, and we have worked towards that. Once we had that annexation issue taken care of, the then city manager and the county administrator could not agree on a tax exchange, which further stalled the development of Harter Packing Company. Harter was left to find a solution to this, and so Harter went out on its dollar and hired a consultant to mediate that dispute between the city and the county on a tax exchange agreement. That was an additional $30,000 and a loss of time to develop. Furthermore, when we went to do the process and application for the Walmart Center, there was a special interest group that said, no, you're not going to go forward. We're going to challenge you, and Harter Packing at a cost of $160,000 defended the city's entitlements for that process. This doesn't include all the consultants and the people that we've hired to guide us through this process. But Harter has a huge investment. When development went forward in the first phase, there was a lot of dissension between Walmart and us as to, we're not paying to oversize your property for development. Harter left $1.7 million in infrastructure that is still out there for future development. And we would request that we could utilize credits on those 1.7. That's going to be one of our issues that we want to address with the city, is that instead of waiting until the plan gets built out, maybe 15 years from now, that money's better utilized up front so that we can use it as a credit towards fees. As to Diana's slide presentation, which I would say, Diana, you deliver a good presentation. The obstacles to development. On this slide number 23, this one pertains mostly to residential. Developers and realtors and buyers are much more astute nowadays when buying homes. The days when homes were out there and there was no end to sight and to building and the cost of homes, those days are gone. Developers take a look at what is profitable, just like anyone, and the landowner looks at what profits there. With the fees being exorbitantly high, what that does, it drives down the property values, and it's a disincentive to develop your property. When you have offers that are lowball offers, because they want to compare you to an existing subdivision that has infrastructure in place, and they want to buy it, you can't afford to do it and put the infrastructure in. So never did I think that the 2000 and 2008, the depth of the home collapse would be so deep. An example of home developers buying and developing property, are they looking for opportunities in existing subdivisions that collapsed during the development, and new properties that have tentative maps on it they don't want to go into because of the market. They know they can renegotiate a better deal with the city and the land buyer. We have existing development agreements, and you can't renegotiate those unless the city works with you. So, as an example, the Dunmore properties those were done with a discount. Edgewater, Plumas Lake, Orchard developments all had existing infrastructure. When those subdivisions collapsed and the owners went away or the developers went away, there was opportunity, and those opportunities are still out there today. There's a lot of property that is being developed under that scenario. I got it. And in reference to the impact fees combined in the required infrastructure improvements and the market pricing for new homes does not leave the builder nor the landowner with a profit margin worth the risk. City impact fees for development of R1 are approximately $60,000 with an additional $6,000 Harter fee in order to develop the required infrastructure. The reason for the $6,000 additional fee was there's such amount of infrastructure that needs to be done. Harter was bordered on three sides with the existing developments that were done under the county. The roads needed to be improved, sidewalks, street lighting. We inherited a lot of those issues, being surrounded on three sides and not having the adequate infrastructure. Harter has gone through, as part of, I said, the $1.7 million, oversizing infrastructure to benefit not only the Harter Pacific Plan, but areas to the north, such as Terra Buena, the Thule Road area, that do not have adequate sewer drainage or stormwater. In reference to stormwater, when Home Depot came to us and said, hey, we don't want to put any money in storm drainage, we'll just dig an acre pond here and we'll put it in a pond. And I said, no, we're not going to have a pond in the middle of our developments. You will, and fortunately we had some negotiations leverage with them, put a storm drainage in. The engineers came back and said, you need 60-inch storm drainage minimum. And I said, why are you talking minimum? What would it cost to increase it to 84-inch for benefit of other areas? It was a nominal cost increase, but we decided to do the right thing. And instead of building a 60-inch outfall, we built an 84-inch outfall to the Live Oak Canal. We've always taken the higher road and always wanted to achieve the Yuba City's goals. And those have been foremost in any of the development we've done. We have a successful shopping center. One former council member congratulated me and said, you know, Tom, thank you. You bring the largest tax base income to Yuba City. And all I want is an opportunity to continue that success. If you take $66,000 in fees and you place it on a 30-year mortgage, you're looking at $122,000, $123,000 on a 30-year mortgage. You have to ask yourself the question, is that the price I want to pay to live in Yuba City? And that's a tough one. That's really, really a tough one. Had we continued with the former impact fees and had a nominal increase with an engineering index and that residential R1 and the R3 built out, Yuba City would be $7 million richer today. Today, it's not there. So this is why we're here. We want you to be successful, but we need to be successful too. Nicole, I don't have a big enough ledge up here, Diana. As you'll see here, it says City Council previously approved. My numbers are not working on yours. Is the city, in order to spur development and do infill for the downtown area, it had a 50% fee reduction in designated infilled areas of the city. The commercial property that is there is probably going to sit until that, if that continues on. I don't see any hope, because if I'm a developer and I got a 50% fee reduction, and in light of policy, if you demolish a building at $1 to $3 a square foot and you rebuild that building, the city collects no impact fees. So it puts a developer that wants to build a project to look downtown and find options to find it, which is good for your redevelopment. I think it's done good for getting rid of some of the older buildings like in Carriage Square. But when you take $20 a square foot in savings times a 20,000 square foot building, that's $400,000 in savings. In addition to that, you don't pay extension. The services are there, the storm drainage is there, you don't pay joint trench fee. So conservatively, it's $20 a square foot you can save in building costs. Theoretically, it could be up to $35 a square foot. You start talking $35 a square foot and you're building a substantial sized building, that's a lot of money. And developers are going to go where they can make the most profit. So the commercial is probably going to sit until something is worked out on that. Also, in the original EIR, as Mr. Boomgarden pointed out, the Harter Packing Company was an infill project. Just here recently, not recently, I say in November of 2018, when I sat down with the city, I was handed a revised copy of the Harter Pacific Plan that was done in 2016, and I asked, why weren't we involved? In that redraft, which has never been publicly circulated, it took away the infill status. I still feel we're an infill. We have existing developments, residential, commercial, that border both sides of our property, or three sides of our property, and some portion of the south side. If there's not some kind of designation so that we can get the same 50% reduction, I'm afraid the commercial property is not viable. I've talked to the Brown Group, and Brown Group says, I can't make the numbers work, not in this market. And then you have to ask yourself, what's it going to take? And what's it going to take is some action with the city and Harter to make that property viable again. So with that, I'm going to conclude my short presentation, and if any council members or planning commissioners have questions of me, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, thank you. I won't mess up the papers.
I'm looking at her. I just thought maybe she's trying to get hold of. Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Is that
Part of the city.
and is the property that is
Yes, due to their dedication of the property for the city's purposes.
thank
Yeah, you're welcome. And so just to summarize, in terms of the investment that Harter Packing's put into the Harter Specific Plan, and Tom touched on it briefly, they prepared the Harter Specific Plan and Environmental Impact Report, defended the lawsuit against the annexation from the Walton Fire Protection District, has significant capital outlay with the development of the Yuba City Marketplace, and ongoing expenses associated with trying to find financially viable projects. So upcoming development, they've submitted a map for Harter Estate South. It's 77 residential lots, equivalent to 15.37 acres with one remainder lot right here, which is the primarily commercial portion. And so that's being processed right now, and so that's a project that would come forward to the Planning Commission at some point in time in the near future. We also have Harter Estates North. It's a 73 single-family residential lot development with 3 multifamily residential lots right here. So you have Butte House Road to the north, Harter Parkway to the east. And just for reference purposes, the water tank properties right here and the park locations right here. So Harter Estates North was actually a map that was submitted in 2015. And it was basically placed on hold, and the Harter folks have requested to begin review of that project again. So Harter Packing has submitted a request for a second amendment to the development agreement. They would like to extend the term of the DA until November of 2039, so that would be a 20-year extension. They're requesting a reduction of the impact fees, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail in some upcoming slides, and then also development of a credit and reimbursement agreement. The credit reimbursement agreement would basically be a template, so as future development occurs, it would be a way to track whether or not they have fee credits coming towards them, or if they're in a reimbursement situation where, as other development occurs, there would be a reimbursement to them. They're also requesting a credit of $1,024,561 against city impact fees for roadway, sewer, and water improvements completed as part of the Yuba City Marketplace project. So the credit would be addressed through a reimbursement agreement. So just a point of clarification, Mr. Tucker noted that they have an investment of $1.7 million into the Yuba City Marketplace infrastructure, and that's correct. But the portion that's eligible for a city fee credit is $1,024,561. And so those are improvements that were constructed that are either in the city's road impact fee program or in the water and wastewater master plans.
Don, is that due to the, I read in the reports here, the oversizing aspect?
Correct. Yeah, it would serve, if it's within a master plan, that it will serve a much larger area. And then in terms of the road impact fee program, you have, Harter Parkway, which is a parkway that's going to serve large, more than just that development.
All right, thank you.
Through the mayor.
Yep.
Diana, I know in a previous conversation, we talked about the cost of those improvements when they were made versus accelerating them into today's dollars. Is that a today dollar figure, or is that the actual?
No, that's at the time. If you were to inflate the $1,024,561 to today's dollars, it's about $1,450,000.
Thank you.
And that's based upon the Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index. They're also requesting credit for additional, they may request additional credit for the additional land that was dedicated for the water tank. So this would go towards water connection fee credits. And then also, because the city was successful in obtaining a grant for the construction of the park, we would need to clean up the DA to remove the timing requirements for the park. The city's actually moving forward with the construction of the park.
Diana, are you aware, was there any initial discussion when the land for the tanks were donated? Was there discussion at that time for credits, or why was that given?
I'm not aware of any discussion at that time. I know there's specific discussion that they wouldn't get credits for the park dedication. The my recollection of the water tank discussions, and Mr. Tucker can correct me, is that it was something that came up, I don't want to call it after the fact, but during, and they agreed to dedicate the additional property, but there wasn't discussion related to giving them credits for that.
So it's essentially at the time was unconditional?
At the time, it's my understanding at the time it was.
All right, thank you. Did you have more on that, Tom? If you wouldn't mind coming to the microphone.
Tom Tucker. After the dedication of the 6 acres, the then Public Works Director and the city engineer showed up in my office requesting to purchase another acre, saying that they had miscalculated the water needs for the western side of Yuba City. When they told me that and they said they needed 1 acre, I said, we've been through a hard process here, a long, drawn-out process. If it's for the benefit of the citizens of Yuba City, you take the 1 acre at no charge and I'll work it out with my partners. I went through a little bit of hell on that. But in the end, the partners came back and said, you make the right decision. So our deal was done, and then we rededicated another acre at no cost to the city.
Thank you, Tom.
They were prepared to pay between $150,000 and $200,000. So we figured the city could use that somewhere else, been more beneficial than 1 acre of land was worth to us.
Thank you.
So moving on to the request for reduction of the impact fees. So this was the last page to the staff report. I know the text is a little bit small, but the request that they've submitted is that for residential property, so low, medium density residential, of which they'll have 150 residential units, they have a proposed fee reduction of $25,000 per unit. For the high density residential, which we would call multifamily residential, 143 units, they're requesting a reduction of $12,500. And then for the non-residential office and commercial, based upon the square footage that's proposed, they're proposing a reduction of 31 cents per square foot for office, $5.12 per square foot for commercial. And this would align it with what's approved as the infill rate for the office and commercial. That's not what's approved. This proposed reduction for the residential does not align with what's been approved for infill by council.
Through the mayor? Yep. Does this area, will it be under the umbrella of a CFD?
Well, there's been discussion about that. As we move forward with the two maps, staff would recommend conditioning the residential projects that they are part of a CFD.
Okay, thank you.
So to move forward, so what would this request for reduction of impact fees do? So if you look at the breakdown of city impact fees, for single family, you have the city impact fee of $25,615.08. County impact fee, which the city collects this, $3,596. A flood protection fee of $3,887.05 for a total of $33,098.13. They are requesting a fee reduction of $25,000. So the Harter request assumes a portion of the reduction would apply to the pipeline portion of the water and wastewater connection fees, which are separate from the city impact fees. But when you look at the water connection fee consists of water treatment at 80.6% and pipeline at 19.4%. So for a 1-inch water connection, where the total connection fee is roughly $8,500, the pipeline portion's only $1,650 for a 1-inch water service, which is what typically would serve a residential home. The sewer connection fee consists of wastewater treatment at 60% and pipeline at 40%. So for a single-family connection, the total connection fee is roughly $7,300. So the pipeline portion, and 100% of the pipeline portion, is $2,900. So when you combine 100% of the pipeline portion of the water connection fee with the pipeline portion of the sewer connection fee, it totals $4,568. So based on Harter's request for a fee reduction of $25,000, when you add that to, when you compare that to the city impact fee of $25,615, and then if you were to give them 100% credit towards the pipeline portion, basically it would come down to they'd be paying a city impact fee, so this portion right here, of $5,183.46 per home. But where this becomes important, as I talked about in a previous slide, they have, not only do they have the city impact fees, they also have the Harter fee. So for a single family residential, add on top of this at least $8,116, because that goes back to when the financing strategy was adopted. So that's not moving forward. And they've contracted with Mike Whipple to update the financing plan, so those numbers could change. But, at that time, a significant burden in addition to the city's fees. For multifamily, an additional $5,308. For commercial, additional $9.58 per square foot. $8.60 per square foot for office, and then $5.01 per square foot for business park. So when you're considering the fees for the Harter specific plan area, you have to consider the Harter fee as well into, when you're analyzing this. So upcoming items for City Council Planning Commission consideration, we have the Harter Estates South tentative map, Harter Estates North tentative map, the second amendment to the development agreement, a reimbursement agreement for those year one credits, and then the template for the credit and reimbursement agreement. We really want to have council approve a credit reimbursement policy, not only that would be applied to Harter specific plan, but also future developments, so that when developers come forward, they know what to expect in terms of what they'll get as credit or reimbursement.
Through the mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
Diana, can you go back to that chart that you had? So just for myself to get better clarity on this, you talked about the city impact fees, you spoke about the county impact fees, the flood fees, and then you talked about pipeline fees and the Harter fees, correct?
Yes.
So then what is the total amount for that package that you just mentioned?
So if you were to take the $33,098.13 for the city portion, if you added the total water and sewer connection fees, and so those are roughly going to be about $16,000 for that. So you have $16,000 plus $33,000. So you're at $49,000 right there. And then when you add in over $8,000 for the Harter fee, you're at $57,000 for a single family home in the Harter specific plan. And like I said, some of these numbers are older numbers in terms of the Harter fee. But I mean, and that doesn't take into account, at the workshop next Monday night, we'll talk about development fees in general. There's a lot more to the fees than just what's on this chart. You also have your building permit fees, school fees. There's a lot more to it than just this. And so it's very complex, but the Harter specific plan, what makes Harter specific plan more difficult than other areas within the city is that they have this Harter fee. Not to say that other specific plans and master plans won't have similar fees, because they will, but we haven't had any development within those plans. And so we haven't had to go through the process of identifying what those infrastructure fees will be. We'll be doing that soon for Bogue Stewart. As Bogue Stewart moves forward, we're going to have to calculate what the fee is going to be for Bogue Stewart master plan to pay for their infrastructure.
Okay, that helps.
Okay.
Thank you.
Also, potential upcoming items for City Council Planning Commission consideration, Harter specific plan amendment. Mr. Tucker noted that there was a Harter specific plan amendment proposed in 2016. That's when we've had projects come forward that were going to be processed and then stopped. So we went through the process of trying to update the specific plan, update the financing plan, and then those were placed on hold because the projects, they decided not to move the projects forward. But if they elected to move forward with some of the projects, then we would have a Harter specific plan amendment, general plan amendment if it doesn't align with the current general plan, and then very important, a financing plan update. Hopefully a more user-friendly financing plan. And then just to note, again, the workshop we have next Tuesday, or next Monday, excuse me, December 2nd at 4 p.m. at the Sutter Yuba Association of Realtors, and the topics include development impact fees, and then Brian Millar, the Interim Development Services Director, will be discussing the 12 growth policies. So in summary, the city and Harter Packing have had a long-standing partnership on the Harter specific plan. Harter Packing has invested a significant amount of time and funds into the development of the Harter specific plan area. And the recommendation tonight is that this is an informational workshop only with no action required. And I know that Harter has some additional folks that would like to come up and speak tonight related to the plan.
Hello, my name is Ryan Dusa, and I've sold new homes in the Plumas Lake area, Edgewater, Sacramento, and also worked on multiple new home developments over the last few years. So with the Harters there, I have a firsthand knowledge in the local new home market, and so they've asked me to kind of give a little bit of an overview here. Based on the current construction costs, fees, infrastructure costs, and whatnot, you basically have to build about a $500,000 home to make it pencil, to make it economically viable. And based in our area, when you get up to that price point, the absorption slows down, and that just creates a lot of risk. And that's not a huge profit margin. That's a standard profit margin and whatnot. And so when you get that kind of risk, that's what scared a lot of the builders from coming to our area. You get that absorption there, it slows down quite a bit once you get up, you get out of the certain loan programs and whatnot. But the window of opportunity is open. You go to neighboring areas, Plumas Lake, I've sold personally out there, Edgewater, Rockland, Sacramento, even out in Colusa now. So the new home market, it is going. I mean, it's strong, and hopefully it's going to last for a while. We don't ever know how long it's going to last, but based on the current indicators, it looks like we've got a little bit of a run left. And based on that, I do believe with a fee reduction, it would greatly increase the odds of Yuba City getting a piece of that market. And with that, the benefits of having the impact fees in your coffers now rather than down the road, the construction jobs, kind of a rule of thumb, every single family home creates about 3 full-time jobs in 1 year. I mean, I know that there's a lot of different builders on it, but so if you build 10 homes, that's like 30 jobs for 1 year. So that has a trickle-down effect to the local economy also. And on top of that, getting the property taxes sooner than later. So I definitely think the opportunity, the window's there, the opportunity's there. And I think with the right action and with the right, both partners playing a part, that you can make it happen. So, any questions?
Yeah, sir, you mentioned, $500,000 home for basically to make things pencil, given the standard profit margin. What is that standard profit margin?
It's about 10% of the home
10%.
price.
All right, thank you.
And I've built new homes here. I've built in other areas too. And the scary thing about new homes, there's one thing that can go right. You build the home on time and make money. You don't even know all the things that can go wrong. So it's kind of scary. But
I have one more question.
Yeah, about 10% is kind of rule of thumb.
You were mentioning the construction of a single-family home generating 3 full-time jobs.
Yeah.
Given other things that have gone on in our state, are there enough construction bodies available to execute?
It's interesting you said. My father-in-law is a local contractor, and there are construction costs have been a big factor. With the Paradise Fire, and then with the recession, a lot of the contractors got out of the business, and so construction costs have gone up. And but the thing there, they've gone up for everybody. For our area, Plumas Lake, Sacramento, and so on. But that's a good point. Yeah, construction cost. That is one of the main factors that makes it more difficult. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
All right, thank you.
Through the mayor.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Mr. Dusa, thanks for your comments. Mentioning an average price of about $500K to make this work. Best guess, what type of median household income is someone going to have to purchase a $500,000 home?
Well, a $500,000 home, I'd have to get my calculator out.
Just take a guess.
You're probably in well, again, this kind of goes, if you're putting money, and that's a different conversation, putting down payments, but on a FHA loan, we only go up to about $300,000. So, you're probably looking at least $80,000 as a household, if not more. Right. And I'd have to do the numbers on that, but, and that's the average house. If you built a little smaller, that could be $450 to make that margin, or $550, but as you know, Interwest is really the only one building now off Blevin, or Blevin and Elmer. And those are in the 5s, up to 6s. And Cressley my wife sold for Cressley up off Stabler, one of the last projects. And those were in the 5s and 6s. And it's just really hard to make it pencil.
Yeah, it's really the point that I was trying to drive to, and I appreciate it, is the fact is, to afford a $500,000 home, you're going to need to be really close, if not over, the 6-figure income.
Yeah.
And our median income for Yuba City is far from the 6-figure.
Yeah.
So that's something we definitely have to take a look at.
Also, or you have to have a lot of equity in your smaller home that you're selling. That's a whole other market condition, but we don't have a lot of those, But anyways, so yeah. Any other questions?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, guys.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and commissioners. My name is Mike Whipple. I work for a firm called Development and Financial Advisory. We go by DFA because in public finance, we like our acronyms, right? CFDs, assessment districts, everything. I have the pleasure of working with Diana and the Harter team for the last several years, working to update the overall financing plan and strategy that Brion had done several years ago. And like Diana had mentioned, the original plan was fairly rigid. It required specific phasing to occur in distinct areas. If you wanted to leapfrog development, from phase 1 to phase 2, you had to complete all phase 1 improvements before you could even start in phase 2. So basically, the project wasn't going to build out with the current financing plan it had in place. So we're streamlining the financing plan, updating the costs, and we're looking at it on a more pay-as-you-go basis where individual projects can come forward look at what the individual infrastructure needs are for those projects and build accordingly. And then I just want to talk about the impact fee that Harter has. I think Diana's right. The old fee was about $8,500. Based on some of the recent calculations that we have been looking at with updated infrastructure costs, those types of things, that fee is closer to $12,000 or $13,000 per unit. So that's just your Harter fee on top of your city impact fees, your planning, permitting fees, school district, everything. So you're talking about a fee burden that gets closer to $70,000, $80,000 per house. Pretty much untenable in the Yuba City marketplace. So what we've looked at is, in addition to looking for fee reductions on citywide fee programs, we're going to come in with our financing plan, which modifies that Harter fee and probably has a reduced rate of about 40 to 50% in terms of what that Harter impact fee is going to be moving forward. So we're looking at that as an issue, and we're going to find ways to hopefully make adjustments to make this project more marketable to builders. Thinking about some of the information that Ryan had presented, you know, I do work in several regions throughout Northern California, and am I on a time limit or? Oh goodness. So just to kind of build on what Ryan was saying, last month the 6-county region, 450 new homes were sold, brand new homes, 2 of them in Sutter and Yuba County. They had I have some statistics here. They had 1,225 new single-family permits pulled last month, 0 in Yuba and Sutter County. Basically tells you the story right there. National builders are not looking at this marketplace. They're not seeing absorption at the levels required to make infrastructure investment, project investment into this marketplace. When looking at, I have some statistics from 2017, when looking at places like Galt and Yolo County where they're absorbing 0.8 homes a week. In Yuba and Sutter County, 0.3, 0.4. So you're not getting the absorption. So you add slow absorption with high impact fees, and you're not going to see the investment from regional builders, national builders coming to the marketplace. So I guess I'll stop there, and I'll answer any questions that you guys may have.
I'm sure it's a jargon, but can you clarify what you mean by absorption? I think I know, but just for the benefit of it.
Yeah, it's just, you know, they look at absorption and how many homes they're selling a week, sometimes how many homes they're selling a month. So they're looking to sell about 4 homes per residential subdivision per month. And that's their absorption of how they can absorb through their project, a subdivision of 100 units. We're selling 4 of them a month, so they can figure out how long their absorption is going to be in from start until build out of the project.
Basically absorbing up the available inventory of homes.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Through the mayor, can you help me understand what you mean by the Harter impact fees?
Yeah, so like Diane had mentioned, we have existing fees. We have city impact fees, which are for fire, police.
The Harter impact fees.
Yeah, so specifically, Harter has infrastructure that is not identified within some of the city fees. And so what they've identified from a fair share cost analysis, they have some of these major public improvements that fall within a new Harter fee that is then charged within all new development within the Harter specific plan area.
So sorry, we're being distracted by some alarm back there. I don't know what that is.
Maybe that was my heart beeping so fast.
I apologize. Can I have you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So what it is, the Harter fee program is a way to equalize infrastructure costs throughout the development land uses within Harter. And so we have some roadways, some sewer, some water, some overhead power lines that get spread evenly among the remaining land uses. And that is represented in a cost per unit or a cost per square foot of an impact fee. So we have like the outer lanes of Harter Boulevard. We have some water lines. We have a few other improvements as well that are identified in the specific fee program just charged within the Harter specific plan area.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's probably because some of the infrastructure, for example, where the residents are going to be, there's nothing in the ground.
That's right.
Okay.
There's additional infrastructure that needs to be built, and some of that falls outside of the city's programs, and so we're utilizing an internal fee program to help equalize costs among the commercial, the residential, and different land uses there.
All right. And I guess a question for Diana, the basis, part of the basis for our reduction of impact fees for infill areas is because there is infrastructure already present. Okay, thank you.
Through the mayor.
Mayor, oh,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
You had stated that you were looking at a reduction of the fees. That's separate from the Harter fees, correct? That's the actual impact fees that you're looking at the reduction request in?
Yeah, if you were looking at that last slide that Diana put up there, that 25,000, and for a single-family detached, yeah, that is something separate from the Harter fee. We internally are revising the overall Harter financing plan and strategy. With that revised plan, at some point I'll be up in front of you talking about that. There will be a reduced impact fee program associated with Harter, yes.
Okay, and then the fee, the Harter fee will be based on the calculation of the new infrastructure cost
Yes,
currently.
correct. Allocated to the
project.
remaining land uses, yeah.
And then I'm sorry, is it Tom, sir? I apologize. You had spoke about an additional approximate $250,000 that was expended in legal fees and other fees that was taken on, that you were also looking for credit on? No? Okay, all right, I misunderstood that, thank you.
Through the mayor. Talking about your absorption rate and the financing plan that you guys are revising. Just speaking very frank, what we've got that's basically 20 years old, so he's very, very archaic and very rigid, as it was said earlier. Are we looking more towards a design that other cities are using around us, that we see a lot of construction going on to where the financing is done in phases and it's a lot more flexible? Is that the direction you're heading?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, that's exactly the direction we're taking. So we're looking at mirroring a financing plan structure that is similar to what you're seeing in places like Lincoln, Roseville, Elk Grove, Rancho Cordova, places where you're seeing a significant amount of residential activity. You know, what we've learned over the past several years, especially because of online sales and stuff like that, that the retail market is changing. And that the real drivers of the economy, both nationally and locally, is residential single-family homes and spending by those homeowners in the local market. So yes, we're changing it to be more consistent with other financing plans where we're looking at this kind of phased approach in terms of not hard, fast phasing, but phasing based on what projects are moving forward and the flexibility to adapt. So, yeah.
Thank you.
through the mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
So since it sounded earlier that we haven't really had a lot of site-specific plans in our area, according to what Diana was saying. So I guess my question may sound a simple answer to it, but this Harter impact fee are with other specific site plans, is that a normal practice to have that set aside? I'm just wondering.
You know, that's a great question. So yeah, most master plan or specific plan projects in the Sacramento region all have some sort of internal fee program for cost sharing basis. Yeah. So if you look at projects in West Roseville, whether it's Creekside or the West Roseville specific plan, whether you're looking at Lincoln and your Village 1 or Village 5 new growth areas, looking at places in Elk Grove like your Laguna Ridge, they all have an internal fee program, which is in addition to existing agency fee programs as well.
And those fees, as you mentioned, were for the infrastructure of that specific land use.
Yeah,
Am I simplifying it?
No, that's basically what it is. You have infrastructure, regional infrastructure that is in the citywide programs, and then you have more localized infrastructure that serves the specific plan. And so that more localized infrastructure that serves the specific plan is what gets rolled into these impact fee programs.
So that would be interesting in our impact fee meeting, to know a little bit more specifics on the fees of the Harter. What would that 8,000, 12,000, whatever include?
Yeah, what components
what is that
of infrastructure?
Total? Yeah, what does that come up to that total?
Yeah, so right now, like I said, the fee in today's dollars would be around 12 or 13,000, and that, you know, what type of infrastructure categories, that includes sewer, water, roadway, storm drain, and those are the typical types of fees that you'll see. in these master plan areas, specific plan areas. It's roads, sewer, water, drainage, and parks. Those are the major infrastructure categories you'll find.
Right. I would just like to have more of a detail outline to each of those expenses, especially with our impact fee review.
Yeah, and I think on the workshop on the 12th, on the 2nd, that I think the fee information you have probably breaks out citywide fees and then jurisdictions, what their kind of specific plan fee areas, because most new development is occurring within these specific plan areas.
All right, nothing further. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Any questions for me?
Through the mayor.
Yep.
For Ms. Langley. Apologize, I should have asked this earlier, but there was a slide that talked about farmland of statewide importance. There was a restriction. Can you help me understand that a little better, please?
I will try. I have to say, as I was reading the development agreement, that one snuck up on me a little bit. And basically, it's an ag mitigation measure because they were converting what was considered farmland to non-agricultural uses. And so this is a mitigation measure that they have to contribute towards. Let me go back to that. So they have to voluntarily agree to contract with a qualified conservation organization, so a company that handles conservation easements, or a public agency, not the city, to establish an off-site agricultural easement on 130 acres of farmland of statewide importance. So basically, just saying that that property will remain in ag production.
It doesn't have to be site-specific to the Harter site?
No, this would not be site-specific to the Harter. This would be off-site somewhere, and it's not specific as to where that would be either.
So this was imposed at the time of the original Harter specific plan development?
Yes, this is a condition on the development agreement itself.
Having spent a little time at a LAFCO conference, I know ag preservation is a big deal right now. Are there any other additional things that might impact that as far as ag preservation?
Not that I'm aware of.
No.
I see no nods from the Harter folks.
I know that there are things looming out there, so. The last question I have, and obviously.
Let me get clarification. So I'm not aware of additional agricultural things in their current development agreement.
Right.
And I think I know what you're referring to. In terms of with LAFCO, there's a push for new annexations or new sphere expansions to consider ag mitigation. Right. Because this is already annexed into the city, this project would not go before LAFCO.
Correct.
And so it wouldn't necessarily be subject to the items that come up from LAFCO.
I just didn't want us to get snuck up on with something that may have existed or is currently being proposed at the state level for ag land.
Right.
Since it was designated as such back then. Last question, I promise. It has to do with infill, and thank you for sending us the infill map. When was that infill geographical area designated? Do you know which year?
So there was an initial designation in 2007 when the impact fees were adopted. It was revised again, and I want to say it was around 2015. I know the current definition was around 2015. I think the boundaries are pretty much the same. They basically took the former redevelopment agency area and said that's the infill area. And then in 2015, they might have had some slight modifications, but it's still pretty much held to that same area.
Because that was my recollection of being on staff is that they were encouraging the infill within the redevelopment agency, and of course that's gone now.
Right.
So we will be looking at infill area as we move forward. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Through the mayor, I'm having a little trouble spreading myself out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a little trouble with the ag mitigation too. Having been on the county planning commission, ag focus was a big deal. So in looking at this property and that the Harter specific plan has never been formally memorialized, we'll say. This parcel area, plan area, is no longer surrounded by ag land. It's surrounded by typical development, residential, commercial, and so forth. So is it still subject to this farmland of statewide importance?
I'd have to refer to the city attorney for probably the legal opinion of that, or Harter's attorney for that. It hasn't been in ag production for many years, and even when it was a cannery, I'm not certain if it was in ag production or if it was more waste discharge for the cannery itself. So, Shannon, maybe you can address that comment.
Thank you, Diana. Sometimes ag mitigation measures are put in, put in on a project because of CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, which requires certain mitigation measures to be put in place. This project has been around long enough that when the original CEQA was done, it's entirely possible that may have been a mitigation measure that was carried forward to the development agreement. So in order to assess that, we need to take a look at the CEQA. Right now, there is a development agreement or an extension of a development agreement. If it's just the development agreement and not in CEQA at all, and it's not intended to be a mitigation measure, it could be that the approving bodies of that development agreement would have the authority to remove that condition. But again, it would take staff looking at CEQA, and it would be looking at the entire totality to see whether or not it would be enforceable or whether it could be removed or not.
So even though the plan itself has not been approved and placed into effect, the reports and such that were generated 20 years ago or whatever still take precedence. Now, will those reports be required, to be updated?
It is possible to update the CEQA as appropriate, and if CEQA, for example, required the ag land mitigation, and that would be no longer applicable for whatever, the passage of time, the change of conditions, it is possible to refresh the CEQA in certain ways to remove that. Again, we'd have to be able to take a look at that to see whether or not that is an option. If the Planning Commission and City Council are inclined to go down that direction, we could certainly take a look at that.
I think that might be of some importance before we actually make any decisions on this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. The railroad spur, has it been abandoned now?
Oh, if I can only talk about that for a moment. So the railroad right-of-way west of Harter Parkway, fortunately, the Harter folks were able to negotiate with Union Pacific to obtain that right-of-way. And so that's why the city has been able to obtain a grant to actually extend the Sutter Bike Path to the new park on the west side of Harter Parkway. East of Harter Parkway, Union Pacific still owns that railroad right-of-way. Correct. For 14 years. No.
Is that it?
Okay.
All right. Anybody else have anything? All right. Quick question, real quick. On the infill areas impact fees reduction, we generally have a 50% reduction within the city. Is that correct?
For parks, transportation, and the pipeline portion of the water and wastewater connection fees.
It's not a 50% reduction of the bottom line. It's just 50% of those specific fees.
Right, and the parks and the road portion are the highest percentages of the impact fees for the residential development, and the roads portion is by large, the highest percentage of impact fees for non-residential development.
And that's specifically to the city impact fees. I have here county and flood protection and whatnot, but it's the city impact.
This is city impact fees, correct?
So on here, and maybe Tom can answer this, there's the city impact fees are $25,615. You're asking for a reduction of $25,000, which is basically 100% reduction of the city's impact fees? Because what was the basis for that? It's number
Mayor,
35.
council members, and commissioners, Mike Whipple again with DFA. So what we were looking at was a threshold, a $25,000 reduction. We're looking at the fees in aggregate. So when you look at the impact fee burden in aggregate in the city of Yuba City, you're talking about totals between $60,000 to $70,000. Obviously, the city does not control all those agency fees. We have school districts, county, other agencies. So what we were looking at was identifying a fee reduction amount per unit that reduces that overall impact fee burden to a dollar amount that we think is financially feasible to local and national builders in order to increase absorption, closer to what you're seeing in some of the other growth areas, from going from 0.3 up to this 0.7, 0.8 sales per week. Yeah.
All right, yeah, that explains why you're requesting a reduction, but where have we come up with the $25,000 amount?
That was the amount to go from a fee of 60 to 70,000 down into to get it into a more marketable range of a 45,000 or so.
So
That's
right,
what.
So did you break it down any further? Because like you said, we have no control over some of those fees. Was the expectation we can't all come out of the city's hide, right?
Well, we didn't envision going to the school district. You're working with the city on cost reduction, impact fee reductions with the city as part of the overall financing plan update. When we look at the impact fees, and we've talked about it as well with Diana, we look at impact fees, which also include your connection fees. So you also include sewer and water. When you add sewer and water connection fees and some other smaller fees that may apply in those sewer and water, there's like a line extension fee and some of those other things that may apply for certain developments. You're closer to a $45,000 or so cost per unit when you include those connections fees. So that's where we're thinking in aggregate between some of those transportation, sewer connection, water connection, we could get that $25,000 reduction.
All right, definitely
I'm open
worthy
to
of more
suggestions in terms of which fees.
Well, so am I.
I think that, I don't think we hadn't gotten to the point of the details specifically.
Right. That's what I'm kind of thinking of where it's going to come from.
Yeah.
Definitely in favor of working with you, but I don't know where it's going to come from because
Understood. Yeah.
But anyway, okay, we have a starting point anyway.
Exactly.
All right, thank you very much, sir.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
a follow-up on your excellent question, and I think also on Councilwoman Espindola's. As this thing moves forward, it would be really nice to know what all the fees are going to be potentially assessed to this plan, from all the entities, including, if you don't mind, the CFD fees, because those are a factor as far as affordability as well.
We can provide
You
that.
agree?
It's for next Monday, the workshop. So actually, Mike Whipple assisted with the apples to apples comparison of the impact fees. And so he already has pretty good breakdown of the city, all of the development fees that go into development for single family residential within the city. And so it would be pretty easy to then add in the Harter fee once we finalize what the Harter fee is going to be, and then any other fees that may be associated with this project. And so we'll definitely make a note of that to bring that forward.
Thank you.
So will this illustration be available at the meeting on Monday?
I would say it's not going to be, because we don't know what the new Harter fee is going to be yet. We need to
Well, we're
finalize.
talking about development fees in general for the city, correct?
We are talking about development fees in general for the city.
So could we see that as an illustration less the Harter development fee?
That's actually included in the staff report.
There you go.
Very good. Anybody else? Anybody from the public care to comment that might be here? Yeah, very good. question is the report available online?
So the staff report's available online. We can post the presentation online, but this is also being videotaped, and the video will be posted online as well.
All right. Thank you very much. Unless we have anything further, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
We have another item.
Oh, we have another. Damn, I must be hungry. All right, let me see that. Oh, number 3. Adopted City Council goals and priorities and goals for fiscal year 2019 and 20.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I have a feeling that I'm supposed to present this item.
Good feeling.
So the City Council at its last regular meeting adopted the strategic goals for this fiscal year. The council had actually looked at them some time ago and have formally adopted them. There are 8 goals that the council specifically ranked as their highest priorities. Number 1 is public safety, ensuring the highest level of public safety, prioritize staffing, public safety, community awareness, and emergency preparedness. The second item is fiscal stability, maintaining and enhancing the fiscal stability of the city. The next item is, go ahead and go to the next, there we go, organizational culture, customer service, transparency, and accountability within the culture. The next strategic goal is business friendly. Yuba City is open for business. And this may be the one item that you would like to discuss with the Planning Commission in terms of the review of the city's development impact fees, which we'll discuss in great detail on December 2nd. General plan and zoning code update, which we are actually working on, and then Brian can provide information on some zoning code updates that are needed. Branding and marketing, which we're working on through economic development, both through the greater Sacramento region and through our own economic development, and then process improvements, customer service improvements, improving the application process, et cetera. Enhancing partnerships with our 2 counties and our cities in both Yuba and Sutter counties. And then I think there's 1 more or 2 more, quality of life, clean and safe neighborhoods, park and recreation and art programs. And then, are there any more? Infrastructure, identify and address our infrastructure financial needs. And number 4, having to do with fixing and maintaining the city's streets and infrastructure is important. And then homelessness and vagrancy is the last of the 8 items. And as the council is well aware, we have both the bi-county homeless committee, and the city council formed an ad hoc committee with 2 commissioners from the County Board of Supervisors, and we met today. So those are the 8 items, and put this on here so that the Planning Commission would be aware of the highest priorities for the City Council. And if the council had any other comments regarding specifically the strategic goal having to do with planning and community and economic development. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, well, there's our goals and priorities. I have to assume everybody has had an opportunity to review them and go through them. And if you have any comment or anything to add, we'd be happy to hear about that. Sir, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the mayor, my comments are going to be targeted towards the goal number 4, which is Yuba City open for business. I'm looking forward to linking the City Council with the Planning Commission as we moved forward and trying to make sure that new business and existing businesses both have a level playing field and a great opportunity to come into and thrive within our city. I know I'm speaking from some personal experience as a property owner that had some commercial development, and there are some hurdles that exist that I don't think need to exist in regards to projects as they come forward. I've also, through the campaign, heard a lot of frustration with folks. I heard a lot of good things too, but heard a lot of frustration from folks in regards to their interactions as they try to do business with the city as it involves businesses. Some of those specifics include just confusion over what is and isn't required of new development, what role the Planning Commission and the City Council has in regards to establishing requirements for new business, especially new construction, but also remodeled construction. So as we move forward into the new year, I'm looking forward to, I believe we have a workshop, Mr. City Manager, in regards to a joint workshop with the Planning Commission coming up sometime after the first of the year. I'm looking forward to, again, just exploring the best ways for both bodies to work forward in the best interest of business and the citizens of Yuba City. Thank you.
Very well said. Yes, ma'am.
On goal 4, the general plan and zoning code update, is there going to be a committee that works on that tirelessly, or is that going to be all staff presented to the commission and the council? I would like to express my interest in both of those items, particularly the zoning code update.
Yes, it has to be presented to the Planning Commission for discussion and ultimately a recommendation to the City Council on changes to the zoning code.
Okay, so no one from the council or the commission will be working with staff on that prior to its presentation?
Well,
I just know sometimes that there's a committee that works on it for months and months and
right, I understand, yeah. We could do that. I've asked Brian to work with each commissioner before the Planning Commission meeting to go over the proposed agenda items, specifically when there are items like that involve a lot of technical and detailed information. So what I've asked and will ask of the new development services directors, they meet with each commissioner before each Planning Commission meeting, especially if it's an item like the Bogue Stewart, master plan, or in this case, if we're recommending changes to the zoning code, that we meet with each of you and go over that well ahead of the Planning Commission meeting, so that there's time to have your input and make changes along the way before it ever goes to the commission.
so I'm just totally not understanding the zoning code. The way what I'm hearing you say is that we would talk to Brian before a zoning code update for a specific clarification, as opposed to going through the beginning of the zoning code to the end of the zoning code and clarifying and cleaning it up and making changes appropriate for the time and needs of the community.
And that's exactly what we're doing. That's exactly the process we're going through, and we would sit down with each commissioner and go over that with you.
Okay. Thank you.
Through the mayor. Again, focusing on this goal, and I agree with the sentiments of my fellow council member. For too long, I heard it during the campaign, the city has been difficult to get business done in. As we approach things, business friendly to me means that it's not just a no, it's how do we get to a yes within the ordinance and codes. And we have a lot of things we've already identified that have to be cleaned up. And when we're telling people that are looking at Yuba City that we want them to come in and we want these things, we need to be able to justify it. I've heard in the past too many opinions with, and it was mentioned earlier with the Harter specific plan, that the developers wanted to put multiple projects, but in someone's opinion, they didn't think that was best suited. And that should not be happening. And we need to be able to stand on a level playing field across the board. So when I say open for business, to me, it means we find a way to yes, and we work together to make the growth happen, because as you heard earlier, our growth in this city, in this county, has been really poor. And we've missed a lot of growth that's happened around us, and we've got to get with that. The second thing, and I have a question for our city attorney, it gets to do with the process improvement. Clear back at the beginning of the year, we started talking about the process to bring items up from the Planning Commission directly to the council without them having to be appealed to the council. And I know that got bogged down in staff, and here we are in November. Can we get an update with where that policy could be coming from? Because we do need to get this rectified and in place, because we made some decisions earlier in this year based upon that being done, and we were expecting that to be done back in April, May timeframe.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Shaw. I understand your frustration. There's been a little bit of staff turnover and some other items that make it rather difficult to continue processing it. City manager and I have been working closely on this item. Just last week, he met with staff and a few others key staff in order to go over the draft ordinance as it has been put together. There have been some other items that have been identified. Staff will be reaching out to you individually to talk to you about those items, because they want to make sure that your concerns are addressed before we go forward with the next steps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am.
Being the newest planning commissioner here, I do look forward to implementing the goals of the city council and seeing a fully staffed planning department to support that process and getting us to having consistent policies that we can implement for you. So thank you.
And thank you and welcome. All right. Anybody else have anything? All right. We will, this time for real, stand adjourned. Y'all have a great night.